We welcome in Ritch Winter to the show. Ritch, how you doing?
Good. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning in Winnipeg to catch my 5:30 flight and made it to the office at 7 o'clock.
They have 5:30 flights.
Yeah, 5:30 flight. It's really
What were you doing in Winnipeg?
seeing Mason Appleton, his wife, and his little boy. We had a pretty nice afternoon together, plotting a little bit for his future. That's a fun part of the road. It's like their son TJ is adorable, and you get to spend some time. And it's a time of year where you talk about their futures and what they're thinking. It's nice to spend some time with the wives and see what they're thinking, because this isn't about just money. It's about where you want to live, and it's nice to be in their neighborhood and see. Winnipeg's really a phenomenal spot to play because the guys and they're so close together. They leave on the road, the wives are hanging out, they're really close, they're having but if you play in New Jersey, there might be four wives here, 4 miles, four wives 20 miles away. And it's really good for team unity. And I can see how, and the neighborhoods are awesome. Like Edmonton, like people come into Edmonton, they think it's not a great spot. And Winnipeg is probably the most horrific drive from the airport to downtown anywhere in the world. But when you get up to the suburbs, it's really nice out there. So it's just fun to spend time with guys.
We'll get you to move your mic just a little bit closer.
Sorry,
to you. So there we go. All right, perfect.
People might think it's better.
Yeah. Well, no, we want to be able to hear you. So that works better. So here we are. It's April 9th. And playoffs are right around the corner, but half the league's out of the playoffs, right? Yeah. So depending on every year, I'm sure it's, maybe it's half my clients, whatever the percentage is, that some guys are going to the playoffs, so they're not thinking contract, you're not even talking to them about it. Right. Whereas other guys, although if you do, you might talk to them now, and then you don't talk to them until the playoffs are over. Are there, for pending UFAs and RFAs, Ritch, and it's April 10th, are there serious discussions with the GM now? Because the GM's job for this year's team is kind of over at this point, right? So does he have more time to talk, or GM's like, don't talk to me until the playoffs are over? How's it work?
It depends on the GM. And it depends on the player because, ultimately, Glenn Sather used to tell me, it's an old adage, but he used to always say the man with the goal makes the rules. And and it's true. So if you have a Marner, even Mason, who's a key part of that third line, is probably the best shutdown line in the league. You're patient, and Chevy's really slow and methodical. It takes him time. I don't, for the life of me, understand, excuse me, why teams don't go to everybody early. Like if you like the player, because here's what happens if you go to the player early. 8 times 8, 6 times 4, whatever the number is, they're sitting at home and their dad's visiting and mom's visiting and the wife's going, but geez, honey, if you get hurt, right? Like quite frankly, if Brad Trelling would have moved a little earlier, both Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk would have been in Calgary. But, if you're sometimes it's good to be patient, right? Because the guy tanks. But if you believe in a guy, I just don't understand why they don't go early. And then it's funny because we're talking to one team about a particular player. Played the minors last year, up and down, having a great year, might get 40 points. And, they came to him because he's in the minors. They offer him it's the weirdest deal ever. Like 1.6 for 1 year, 1.5 for 2, 1.4 for 3, and it goes all the way down to 6 years. And of course, they think that's really attractive, right? But it's funny. I love what the assistant GM said. He said, we think he's worth X, right?
Right.
And he goes that's July 1st money. So he said, okay, well, we'll see you then. But it's really true. So as you approach July 1st, if he's a capable player, the money goes up.
Yeah.
So you just got to be patient. Now, if you're in a situation with a younger player, maybe he's not getting qualified. Now you're starting to do a little research, try and figure out if it's a European option, are they going to qualify him? And you try and do that kind of clandestinely, just, not to show your hand that you're a bit nervous about his future. So it's just time. It's really a time where you start plotting the future. Some of these kids don't know where they're going to go. Mason, do they put their house up for sale? Do they keep it?
Like historically, so somebody like that who lives in Winnipeg is a pending UFA. Would you wait until he signs because even then if he's not in a contract, it's going to be July 1st or July 2nd. So that would still give you enough time to sell your house. Then you're not going to, put your house up for sale in May, right? Or June.
Well, you might, because it's easier to sell your house in May in a place like Winnipeg. This isn't a metropolitan center that's got a lot of influx of people. So it's, you might be holding on to it for a year.
But what if you sell it then you just end up signing there? Then what do you do, right?
Well, then you probably made enough money to buy another one, probably, which might be, but that also might be in the plans, right? Because you might have had another child during the course of the last 2 years, maybe a couple. Now you're thinking of upsizing a little bit. It really depends. And it depends where you live too, because you play in Winnipeg, not a lot of friends coming to visit. Oh, you get traded or signed with LA, New York. All of a sudden, you're not only a spot on the hockey tour, you're a spot on the vacation tour.
Right.
Hey, Ike, we're coming to town. Hey, like, what are you guys doing? Right? Doesn't happen in Winnipeg. I mean,
No.
it happens with your close friends, but it doesn't happen with a number of them. So there's just lots of things to think about.
So you get a lot more Klingons in the other place, is what you're telling me.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's kids got to go to daycare. They got to start thinking about that. The older kids got school, and to me, it's really. I just don't really think about it much. But I go home and a player gets traded, and we talk about it, and I go home to the same house, same drive, and all of a sudden they're packing up and moving across the country, and it's tough when you have 2, 3 kids, right? And so planning ahead, and I think I try never to leave July 1st to July 1st. Like I want to be planned well ahead. When in fact,
are you saying where your clients are going to sign before July?
Well, yeah,
1st?
because I like that Ouija board. We use that, and that's pretty effective. But what you do is you talk to general manager and you find out what they're looking. So Jason, what are you looking for?
Right.
What do you think? Now it's hard. You have to be patient because you call this week. Of course, we're still in the season. You call 2 or 3 weeks from now, where the teams that have missed the playoffs, they might have had their scouting meetings, but they haven't. They're not really sure yet. They haven't gone through the depth charts. They haven't looked at it. They'll tell you like we think we're going to need a 3 in goal, probably a right shot D, top 4. But, we're not sure. And then they're not sure because they're talking trades probably and some other things that we're not doing. So you just try and get out ahead of it. But it starts with understanding, and then you'll say things like, well, who do you have? They'll ask you, like, who do you have? Well, I have Wayne Gretzky or Mario Lemieux. Oh, well, we like those guys. Yeah, we like those guys. And you get a sense of, yeah, what's he thinking? Because sometimes what's really funny, like there's so little communication in the National Hockey League. Like it's almost a sin. Like the communication problem is someone's communicating. Like who told them? Who told the player that? It's bizarre, really. And so I'll talk to players about talking to their teammates, reaching out and trying to figure out what everybody's thinking, because ultimately you don't want to go into July 1st. I when Marian Hossa went to Chicago, and like I did a deal with Ken Holland when he signed the 1-year deal that he would let me talk right after the playoffs, give me permission. Because can you imagine making a 12-year decision? And I remember saying to Marian, so I'm asking him questions like, where do you think you want your kids to live? Like what kind of environment? What kind of what do you mean kids? I don't even have kids. I said, well, you're marrying Yana.
Yeah, and if you're signing a 12-year deal, you're probably gonna have
chances
kids.
are she's pretty attractive. I think there's likely to be, you'll get one by the goalie at some point. And yeah, I never thought about that. Right. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Now, it's funny because we signed the first 12-year deal and then they ended those, but it's challenging and there's just a lot of thought to go in. And they're now racing back home to Slovakia or Canada. There's a lot of things going on in their lives. People always think, man, they play for 2 hours a day. But I'm with Mason yesterday. He's got practice. He comes home. We're having lunch. So, his agent's in. He's got to deal with that. And then he's going over to get some like a little bit of adjustment on his back. Like these guys are, they got to take care of themselves. It's not 2 hours at work and then home all afternoon watching the Masters, right? It's just not the way it is. So
no, that's the agent's life.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
And but the thing is that it's just people just don't understand the focus that they have to have. And where the hockey has 2 basic basic environments. You're playing well. Things are going great. You leave the rink, you don't think about it till you get back. Things aren't going well. You can't think about anything else.
Yeah.
And so, it depends where you are, but that's why I always think the James Neal deal always jumps out at me. Like he wanted 1 extra year and it ended up ruining his career. Like, come on, guys. Like you live in, Vegas, you live in LA and Manhattan Beach. Like you want an extra $100,000, like the extra year. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Now you just one of your clients, not a big name, and you've talked about this a lot, but Pitlick, who is the leading scorer at Minnesota.
Yeah.
He just signed an AHL deal with Bakersfield just to get some pro games in down the stretch, and they're super banged up, so he's probably going to get more of an opportunity than he even thought.
Going to get a lot, yeah.
Right. But he signed an AHL only deal just for this year, or is it next year as well?
No, we just signed what they call an amateur trial.
Just an ATO for the rest.
And the reason you do that because you want control. Like if it doesn't go well, you get a chance to go wherever you want. And so you kind of play and try and figure out where the spot is going to be, where they're going to get the most exposure. I actually think Brett is he's a huge has huge upside. He's got a lot of skill. I mean, like, he led 2 college hockey teams in scoring in 2 different conferences, right?
Right.
Like, this is not a bad play. Like, he's a really good player. And we had one team chasing him and chasing him and chasing him, like one of the better teams in the league. And he just couldn't decide. It's the hardest thing for these kids is.
But why couldn't he decide?
Choice. No, it's choice.
But why wouldn't he decide on an ATO? Like, would it matter which team you sign an ATO
No,
on?
no, it doesn't matter to me.
Oh.
But you start but when they have choice, they never have choice. They get drafted, get told to go there. They get traded, they get told to there. And I remember, so many players just like, well, what do you think? Like, so what I do historically, especially with the players who have lots of options, is I'll put them in touch with the coach. Before we sign, you have to talk to the coach, because they know within 30 seconds if that guy gets his game. As hard as this is to believe, I won't name the expansion team. One of my clients gets picked up. He's a pretty good player. He's got like 250 NHL games. And the first question the coach asked him when he saw him is, I don't know much about your game. Can you kind of fill me in on that? So you want to be in a situation where the coach gets you.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Because honestly, the GM, it's almost irrelevant.
who cares?
Yeah.
Like, Berkey loves you. Stan loves you, but Joel won't play you. So it doesn't matter. So, I just encourage, and guys go, well, I don't need to talk to him. And then they talk to him. They go, geez, that guy doesn't even know who I am. Like, I'm not playing there.
Right.
Like, he thinks I'm a defenseman, or, it's not that bad, but that one instance, tell me a little bit about your game. You'd think an expansion team coach would have actually asked somebody a few questions, maybe would have watched a little video.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Say, like, I think these are your strengths. Outline why.
Yeah.
What do you think are your strengths? Because I think that's important in the conversation. Is, as a coach, you want to know how the player views themselves, because how the player views themselves can impact a little bit on how you, not how you view them, but
is he a realist?
Like, guess what? I'm a really good defensive player, and the coach is watching the video. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and I think the other thing we encourage to do, we have a goal setting program that we use. Initially, it wasn't very well received because coaches don't want to talk to agents, right? Historically, they just want to avoid us. And but we insist that our players, especially the younger players, go see the coach and understand what the coach wants. Like, it's amazing how many players in the NHL you say, so what do you think your coach wants?
I don't know.
He says, well, he wants me to be a little more physical. Well, what does that mean? How do we measure that?
Yeah.
Is it 5 hits a game? Is it, what is it like? I don't really know. I said, can you imagine working in a law firm? And you sit in your office for 3 years and try and hope that someone gives you a memo to write? Like, it's mind boggling, but generally there's just we could improve a lot as a business in terms of helping coaches get leadership training. We talked about it in that love segment we did a while ago, trying to help them understand how to motivate players, because the X and O's important.
Yeah.
But they're like the physicality of the game. You're not going to improve. You're not chasing Connor McDavid by working out a little harder. Right? But you might approach him if you get some mental, psychological training, high performance training, so you're thinking different. But and I always tell the players, the example I use. So if the coach tells you to stand on one leg during the national anthem, what are you doing? They smile and, yeah, I'm probably doing that. Like, it doesn't matter. The coach might tell you something we completely disagree with, but he opens the gate or taps you on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And if
he has a big control. So
you want him to, first you want to understand what he wants. You want to show him that you're passionate about doing what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute he starts, you understand what he's doing, he's watching to see if you're doing it.
Yeah.
Now you've started to take a little bit more active involvement, and coaches, now guys don't, they always don't want to go too many times. But there isn't a coach I've ever found in the National Hockey League. I love when Mike Babcock first did it with Thomas Tatar, though. We all on the call together, and Mike's just, he's Mike. So his comment was, Tats, make love to your girlfriend, not the puck. That was understandable. Like, we got it, right? But now can we kind of try and process that? And it's funny because coaches like Tats was told when he went down to the minors to improve his skating, or Jimmy Neal and Kenny Holland and I were going, I don't really get it. Like, he's not Connor McDavid, but he's a pretty good skater. So we got Tats to hire Mike Babcock's recommended skating coach. So he goes to Grand Rapids, gets 6 skating
and
lessons.
The skating coach says, oh, this guy's a good skater.
Well, no, he comes back and Babs goes, oh, I told you guys. It's unbelievable. I didn't improve like even at all in 6 lessons. but he's looking for it. Like so
it's a preconceived notion, a preconceived bias.
It's like Einstein said, change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. How does Marty Straka get bought out by the Florida Panthers? Two pretty smart executives in Doug McLean and Brian Murray. And 3 years later, he gets 94 points. How's that possible?
Yeah.
I paid you to go home, because it is true that how many stories have we heard from players? Like, if I could get more power play time, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than that guy. And you know what? Probably that's right. But the coach is never wrong, because what the coach does, if he perceives you as a guy that can't score, Marty Straka goes on the fourth line, plays with Bill Lindsay. Right? And then he goes to Pittsburgh. They see him as he scored 30 as a rookie. They put him with Yags, and he gets 94 points. Same player. And interestingly enough, his points per minute played 5-on-5 were almost identical in both places.
Yeah.
The only difference is
powerful.
And I love that stat, because people don't pay enough attention to it. Because if your stats at 5-on-5 are pretty good on the fourth line compared to the guy in your second line, that's pretty telling, because you're not playing with very good players.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to try that guy on the second line a little bit and see how he fits, and there's some very basic statistics that aren't, they're not in the fashion as much as they used to be, but they're critical.
Oh, I would agree. When we come back, one of the big changes coming up now from an agent perspective and for players and especially some of your younger clients is the aura of NCAA, and are they going to get paid more? Leaving university, we know the Golden Bears lost 6 of their players to go to NCAA, even though they're not going to be there for the full ride, so they don't even get a full degree.
Right.
We'll talk to all of that, and not just in hockey, but in sports in general. Chelsea Late will join us, as she wrote a huge article about this and what does it mean to Canadians, and the NIL, is it as appealing as people suggest? We'll find out next in the Business of Sports on the Gregor Show, presented by PlayAlberta.ca. Jason Gregor, Ritch Winter, the Business of Sports on Sports 1440, Oilers Nation, YouTube, Facebook, and X, is always presented by PlayAlberta.ca. Get in the game. Use the promo code Gregor100. That's Gregor100 when you sign up and make a donation, make a deposit, and you'll get an extra 100. Check it out, casino or on a game at PlayAlberta.ca. Oilers, of course, hosting the St. Louis Blues tonight. The Oilers got a boatload of injuries and illnesses. Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, Draisaitl, Ekholm, Skinner, Frederick, Kane.
But if Calvin can get the offense going with those passes, we'll be fine.
Yeah, he's a Masters and Trophy winner. Why can't he get some points?
Oh, he's going to
tell him to do more.
That pass in that game in Long Island, wasn't it Long Island?
Yes,
it's pretty good.
Yeah, there you go. Now, we continue on the Business of Sports. We are joined now by Chelsea Late. She wrote a very interesting article at SB Nation outlining NIL. What does it mean for basketball? But it's the same for hockey and all these other sports, and kind of where it's going to be. And, a lot of Canadians who are deemed international students, right? That everybody sees NIL. How realistic is it that Canadian players, amongst others, will actually be benefiting from NIL? And Chelsea joins us now. Chelsea, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm excellent. I know you wrote lots about basketball, but it's basically the same for all the sports. And technically, and I want to use that word, technically, international students who are on visas to come to NCAA, they're not allowed to qualify for NIL rights. However, there is the loophole where, and you used in your article, Elia Edwards, who graduated from UConn. She signed with Adidas. She actually came home to Canada, signed the contract, did the work she needed in Canada before rejoining UConn. What was the work she like? Was this a one weekend thing? What did she do?
It's just basically like photo shoots, stuff like that, things that they can do while she's in market. And then, she was so close to graduation anyway that it didn't take too long for her to be out of the NCAA system and be able just to join the normal Adidas campaigns anyway. So it was mostly just the signing of the contract and the announcement that had to be done up in Canada. But, now that she's out of the system and into the WNBA, it kind of just works as normal.
So when she was in, though, like for basketball, because it seems like especially in basketball, it's like a small group of players who are getting NIL. Right? Like, it's not like, hey, we've got, there's how many schools there are. I know, and, there's over 100 schools, probably 200 if we go men and women combined. Like, how many people or how many players are actually getting NIL money?
Yeah, I mean, it's changing. I think the rules kind of have been shifting a little bit every year, honestly, as they figure out how they want the system to work. In terms of endorsement deals, I mean, that is just kind of person by person, depending on what offers you're getting. I know a lot of these schools have local deals that most of the players can take advantage of with local businesses and people in the community who want to support the team. Obviously, you have the stars like the Caitlin Clarks and the Paige Beckers and all of that who are getting more national endorsement deals and more being signed to bigger brands. And then, the idea of kind of NIL collectives, which is kind of like almost like a player pot of money that each school have to be able to give to players, that's going to be introduced as well. And so they're kind of trying to find different ways to pay these players. But again, like all of this is stuff that international players can't access because of the kinds of visas that they have to be on in order to be there to play.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, so the player pot and like the local Bob's, grocery store who wants to support Ritch and get, hey, here's Ritch, and hey, come here and have some mayonnaise or whatever it is. They're not going to be eligible to do that because you can't leave the country. So even those NIL pots that are building, and let's say, Michigan Tech has $1 million in NIL pot. They can't play. They can't pay any of the international players that money.
I mean, unless there's some sort of loop around where they can make it work to have them be paid in Canada, the answer is no, just because it does count as income. And on those visas, you can't make any income while in the United States.
But you take it, you just give a signing bonus, have them do a bunch of signings in Canada. They're like, you don't think I think anybody's naive if they think a graduate of Harvard or Princeton who pays no taxes and makes $50 million a year is not going to be able to figure this out. I mean, they'll just manage it because they've always done this. This money's been going to players for years. It's just never been out front, right? We know that, right? So they'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's just, finding different ways to be able to work within the rules.
And the reason I bring it up, Chelsea, is because anytime something new comes in, and especially when it revolves around money, everybody gets really big and wide-eyed, like, oh, this is going to be great. We're all going to make it. But it's really going to be for a small percentage of it. And especially like hockey's growing now for sure. And I know that, I've heard some hockey schools, some of them have upwards of $1 million, if not more, to spend for their players. Obviously the college football and basketball, those are the two biggest college sports. So they probably have even more. But do you see like what has there been any pushback at all where, they're trying to squeeze some things in as loopholes that have been closed already?
I don't know of any specifics. I do know that there is a big debate, especially when it comes to the women's side of, are you going to make more money playing in college or playing professionally, since there is such a big pay gap when it comes to professional women's basketball as opposed to men's basketball. And I mean, you could probably say the same thing about hockey with the PWHL now and the NHL. Like, it's very likely the exact same thing. So, there's a little bit of pushback as to how much money they're making. And I mean, it's kind of becoming the same thing as professional sports where players are moving to specific schools because of specific amounts of money that they're able to make. And, yet the transfer portal makes it so that, they can easily hop from school to school every year. So, there's pushback on certain things when it comes to that. I don't think there's been pushback as opposed to, them being able to like make the money like, universally.
Right. So do you think as NIL money increases, and we've talked about this, more donors are going to give more money because they're competitive and they want to win. Have you, in your discussions with NCAA, are you hearing that we might see like a minimum, like you get one transfer portal in your career as a college student, or maybe you got to sign multiple year deal with the school because the basically unrestricted free agency for every player every year in the portal just isn't working long term?
Yeah, it's becoming more of an issue. I think this year is when people have started to really talk about it. I mean, think back like 5-10 years ago, that was the case. Players only got, to transfer during certain circumstances. Sometimes they had to sit out a season. And so now people are kind of talking about, oh, should we put more restrictions on it? Do the things that you just said, like give them one free transfer. And then, after that, they have to sit out, or, make it so they have to commit to a school for at least 2 or 3 years and certain things like that. I mean, I haven't heard anything specifically from the schools. This is just people kind of like speculating on what to do. But it is becoming a problem because, I mean, right now in the NCAA women's side, at least there's over 1,500 kids in the portal right now, which is wild to think about. And, you know, schools are losing entire recruitment classes as well. So
Yeah.
When you think about that, it's kind of making it hard for these programs to build consistency in order, and, you know, and that's a really big part of winning as well.
Chelsea Late joins us, talking about the NIL and the portal and everything else in NCAA. Now, what's interesting, it's technically, or not technically, it's actually called an F visa for the students. When they're on an F visa, they're not allowed as international students to make any money. But then,
so they're kind of getting
Effed
a little
bit.
Yeah,
but then you get, if you work in the US, then you can get what's called a P-1 visa, and then you're able to work. Do you know it? Let's say you were a second, third year international player on a F visa. Could you sign an endorsement deal that says, I'm not going to get paid until I'm on my P1 visa? Because even if you only pay, in the WNBA or you play in the AHL or anything else, could you get deferred money? Do you know, is that even a possibility?
I mean, as far as I know, that might be a possibility. I'm not sure if they've really tapped into that. But yeah, I mean, the rules switch as soon as you change to that P1 visa. So, I mean, I don't see why that could be an issue unless the actual contract is.
There's another angle though, because like Dominic Hasek, by way of example, Marian Hossa, these guys are pretty popular even after they've retired. They have P1 visas, right? So they can come and do endorsement deals and do other things. So maybe Adidas signs a guy or one of the, a female male basketball player to a employment contract. So maybe that's another way, because like you can go to school. I mean, I took my artificial intelligence certificate at MIT. It wouldn't have mattered where it was, right? So so I mean, again, it's just everybody's fantasizing if they think that this F visa is going to be a restriction. It just really
for sure.
We've talked a lot, like the bigger schools, and I guess the bigger schools have more alumni, and then some of the alumni have deeper pockets. And as far as you've heard, is there a limit on how much, endorsement deals a school can have? Like, essentially, is there like a salary cap on this, or can these big schools, if Ritch walks in and says, "Hey, I want to give $15 million because I want my school to be able to attract the best players," is there anything stopping that right now, or is it just the wild, wild west? You can spend as much as you want.
Yeah, right now it seems to be the wild, wild west, and I think that's why the transfer portal is kind of blowing up in the way that it is, because the players are starting to realize as these rules go into effect that schools are offering them more money, and so that's why they're leaving. And I mean, that's not the only reason, but it definitely is becoming more prominent. And as far as it goes right now, you can offer as much as you want and accept as much as you want and move as much as you want. So it's the wild, wild west.
But the real challenge, the real challenge is, like, do you want the guy who just wants the money on your team, right? We were talking about Marian giving up tons of money a while back, and
but this is different because
no, but like think about it, like if I'm moving schools to make money, do I even want that guy on my team? The guy that's choosing to leave a great coaching staff and great so it's it's the chemistry in your room. I mean, the Detroit Red Wings were playing 2, 3, 4 times what other teams were playing for. They didn't win every year.
Yeah.
So it's no guarantee of success. And if you're moving, like think about it, like the Detroit Red Wings spent a lot of money, but they had a lot of restrictions in the collective bargaining agreement that allowed them to keep players even at that point for 5, 6, 7 years. You got these kids recycling every year.
Oh, it's a challenge. And Chelsea, it's interesting because it wasn't just Elia Edwards. You mentioned Toby Fournier out of Duke, and, she became an ambassador for Roots. And so for the women specifically, because you talked about, what they're getting paid in the WNBA, and it's a business model. I understand they're not going to get paid what NBA players make because they don't make as much money as a league. But do you think when you talk to the women playing, are many of them say, well, I'll just play college longer because I can make more money here for the next few years in college rather than leave?
It really depends on the player and just kind of how much of a, audience they have. For players like Caitlin Clark, for example, who are making well and beyond the WNBA salary and endorsements that are just going to follow her through her career. Yeah, it didn't make sense to stay the entire time she was eligible in the NCAA. But for, players who, don't have that big of an audience and aren't making those endorsement deals, the idea of staying in college longer to make this NIL money is appealing to them.
Well, think Adam Fox, for example, spurned Calgary, wanted to play with the Rangers, had no interest playing in Calgary. he can get 100, 150 grand, at some point, some donor, he's going to just, I mean, it's going to really, it could potentially have a big impact, maybe not on your superstars because they're playing right away, but it's going to have a big impact on that middle six, that third pairing D, right? Like,
yeah, but Paige Beckers, like, look at her. She's a pretty big name in women, and she stayed longer, right? So was she making more? Was that part of her reason to stay?
There was a few reasons. I mean, she missed a year because of injury. She tore her ACL. So I think for her, it was more about finishing her 4 years as a player. And I mean, they had a great chance to win a championship. They did win a championship. Yep. So I think that was just kind of the goal. And she ended up, achieving that. So I think it was more about that for her than the money aspect of it, because again, she's one of those players where her endorsements are just going to follow her into the WNBA now.
Well, and then probably she's going to get more now because they won the national title. Like, it's perfect timing for her, right? Like, you leave as the national champion, you come out, you're probably going to be the number one pick. Like, it's a perfect storm for her.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, she has been for 5 years now, UConn's biggest name. She's been a huge name in women's sports, and now she's just kind of becoming, mainstream as well. So the timing for her ended up working out great. And, the fact that she was able to finish with that national championship, of course, is just kind of the cherry on top to the whole story.
Well, and you can't forget the fact that, the young hockey player's not getting TV exposure while he's there. They're getting big exposure.
Yeah,
even the women
100%.
are getting huge exposure. So you might actually make a business decision to say, look, let's stay here a year longer because development reasons too. You get to play more, you get to dominate, all that's, but it's important. While you're dominating, there's hundreds of thousands, not millions of people watching that, and they're all customers of somebody.
Yeah. No,
exactly.
It's a big benefit. Chelsea, was a great article. We really appreciate it. It's kind of ongoing that article in 6 months might be outdated because the rules are changing so quickly. Thanks so much for your time.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
That's Chelsea Lay. And I think it's really important, like, especially for parents out there who have sons and daughters, the opportunity for girls in college sports, especially in basketball, volleyball in some of those markets is really big. And, like, there's the national aspect is one side of it, but the local one, and that's where I think the national big exposures, like if you get Adidas, you can come back to Canada, Rich. I don't care where you're playing, you're going to be able to do that.
Right.
But if you're playing at Northern Michigan or you're playing in Michigan and they've got, Bob's grocery store, Bob's, car lot, well, you can't get the NIL money from him because you can't go back to Canada and promote it.
You can, depending on how big Bob is, right?
Because if he's a national dealer.
No, but even if he's a local dealer. So what you do is you shoot your commercial in Toronto, you sign the deal in Toronto, you get all the visuals done, and then you come back. Now he can't make any. So you're going to pay him $100 grand.
Can the person be in the commercial that runs in the US?
I don't know that, but
right?
No,
I'm guessing
I
that
would
might
be
the challenge.
It's not because the services were rendered in Canada, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, okay. So you want to give him $100 grand for the year. So you pay him $100 grand for the commercial and a bunch of stuff he did up in Canada. And then he comes for free for all the appearances. It's like so easy. Like, it's why the wealthy pay no taxes and all the rest of us pay the freight, right? Because we can't afford to get people to figure it out. And again, Princeton grad who's worth $400 million, who's a big hockey fan. He was probably paying before the NIL rights, right?
Well, and then and we'll take a break. But the one thing that I do want to get, the money's, because let's be honest, to start off in hockey, you know what? How many guys are going to get? You might get 20 grand, whatever. And that's great. Hey, 20 grand's better than nothing. Let's not kid ourselves here. But it's not life-altering money by any stretch. But some of the decisions, I believe, by some of these players, Rich, and we'll get into, and you're going to have dealing with this with young guys, and we'll talk about it next, and how I think the guidance, you've talked about opportunity, chase that over money. Well, if you're going to college, we know what the odds are of your chances to being an NHL player. Now, you could be a pro player somewhere else, sure, but even those odds are pretty low. Your schooling's super important. Oh. But right now, some of these people, the decision on their schooling to be there for 2 years, that's not necessarily the best. So we'll get into that.
Yeah, lots of elements around that.
Yeah, when we return on The Gregor Show, presented by PlayAlberta.ca. Hey, welcome back, Jason Gregor. Rich Winter here in the business of sports. And Rich, we got a lot of texts. Hey, guys, Zach Edey made a bundle at Purdue. Yeah, well, Zach Edey, sure, he's a top pick, and everything's great. We're talking about, because, U of A lost 6 guys. So I'm using them as an example. How many of those guys are going to be stars in NCAA hockey? I'm going to say not many. Right? So maybe none. So, you go there, it's 3 years. Now you have clients that are there. And so the other big thing at times is the myth of full ride scholarship, right? You get a full ride scholarship to NCAA, right? It doesn't always mean you have no cost, right? Like a lot of times you might have other expenses significantly on top of it.
Pay your way there. There's lots of, there's, it's not free.
Yeah, no,
completely.
No, not close, right?
But there's so many elements that people don't think about. Like if you're really forward thinking, you got to think of your school and pick your school, because I don't care if you're a third line grinder who worked his tail off and never became an NHL player. There's a whole bunch of the people in that corporate community around that school that liked you as a player. Right. And there's job offers, and so, yeah, you might give up some, but you might get a 40-year career in an environment where you can make a lot of money and have
if you want to stay working in the States.
Yeah. Right. And like, who really wouldn't? If I won't remember, my family broke their arm this week, 9.5 hours in emergency to get a cast. I remember going to meet with Kyle Davidson, the GM in Chicago, and he didn't give me the right address, so I met him for lunch, and I went across the street and to get some directions, and I'm looking around it. This is a hospital. Yeah, he said, "Holy smokes, it's nicer than my hotel." And yeah, I honestly, if I had to do it over again, I would have never come back. From a lifestyle perspective, but I mean, I like it here. Obviously, I moved here and I have 5 kids, and I like it, but there's a lot not to like about Canada. Just go to emergency for a couple hours tomorrow night.
Yeah. What's interesting though about it is, because as Chelsea mentioned, like there's still so much unknown and it's changing every year. And so you have a player who's leaving WHL, right? Because now he got offers to go to NCAA.
Yeah.
And beforehand, you used to know, okay, this is the coach. I can look at I got these guys are seniors. They got 1 more year. These guys got 2 more years. Now I come in, I'm going to move up the ranks. I'll probably be in the third line the first year, but these guys are graduating. It's not like an NHL team where, I think I can be better than him. You just know there'll be an opportunity because those guys are gone. Yeah. But now the porthole changes all of that. How does that change? Like, does it even matter what school you originally choose to go to? Because the odds are they might bring in 3, because you can't control who's going to go in the porthole and who that school is going to approach.
It could change dramatically. Like and I think you got to focus more though on the quality of the coaching staff, because that's likely the cohesive attraction for a lot of people. Okay. So if you're a good player, and I think the portal, I don't really like it. I'm sort of with Tom Brady in the sense, like, you know what, things are tough. You don't quit. It's why working through your marriage and working through relationships with your friends, like all of that's part of the growth in life, and just walking away from every challenge is not a good thing. But on the other hand, there's some bad coaches out there in the NCAA and the NHL and various spots, and the ability to move away from that and get the information out that is the case. Maybe it improves the quality of coaching and, in the entire business. So there's benefits to it, but yeah, it's just from a loyalty perspective. I grew up a BC Lions fan and, Calgary Flames fan and Stampeders fan. And, you like that all of those guys were there for a long time,
Well, and so that's, as an agent, when you have a player, because I find, and a lot of it when it comes to hockey now, depending on where you play, if you want to pay, you can make a team.
Yeah.
And so there's not a tryout, there's not getting cut. You get to play there. Everybody you're playing with. I'm not necessarily certain that's the best strategy, my own opinion on it, because you don't get to pick who your coach is at all levels, right? And when you get to the levels that truly matter, because no offense, where you're playing at U13 is irrelevant. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's irrelevant. You might think your kid's the best player there. Great. There's a lot of your kids in every other market. There's a best player on every team somewhere. Sometimes the second best.
That's not playing ever in the NHL.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we have this just moving around, and the minute I don't like where I'm at, I up and move. I just feel like every time you do that, you're creating less of an opportunity for your player to see and learn how to deal with adversity. Because the truth is, in pro sports, Rich, and you see, if you can't deal with adversity,
oh man,
you're probably not going to stay a professional athlete.
Like I get guys complaining about their coach. Or coach is terrible. I go, yeah, he is. I wouldn't put my child in his environment if I could do anything else. But sorry, he's your coach, and they own your rights for 5 more years. So suck it up. And if you don't learn to do it, but that's the nature of the kids nowadays, right? They want instant gratification. right? They're on the internet, they're seeing all of these things. And of course you give guys choices, they'll make bad decisions, right? It's important. It's just, it's creating an environment of self-interest that is really counterproductive to really healthy team environments. But there will be guys like who turn down a lot of money to not play in Edmonton or not play somewhere else or to pursue their dream or to look for opportunity. And eventually those guys will become the cream of, the cream of the crop that people are looking for. And they'll, but it's really like kids, like talking to a coach yesterday, to a friend of mine, and it's like you can't tell them anything. Like they don't listen. They're on their video games. You can't get through to them unless you talk to them through some video environment. And it's like, but of course the challenge there is to figure out how to speak in the language.
Well, then you got to,
your listener,
yeah,
right? You got
when
to figure
someone
it out.
tells me they don't listen, I'm always kind of like, well, are you communicating properly?
Well, I think there's a lot of both, right?
Yes.
But it's because it's easy for the coach to say, well, I always remember Coach Wooden. He has a great line, and he would go often to watch coaches. Coach was an awesome guy, and he would go watch high school coaches who invited him out. And they'd talk about what they're teaching their players, and he would say, well, you're not. I'm watching the practice. They're not doing it. And so coach always said, you have not taught until they've learned.
Right.
That subtle
Yeah,
little.
it's a very good point, right?
Yeah. So the subtle shift is okay.
Yeah.
They're
easy.
not doing it.
It's
Okay,
their
that's
fault.
my fault, which is maybe the reason why you fired the coach and not all the players, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately he didn't get it out of them.
Yeah, you can't. To me, when anybody says, well, none of the players are listening, I'm like, well, maybe your message is not being delivered.
Believe me, if
in effective
Cindy Crawford walked into the dressing room and had something to say, they would be listening to every single word she said. So figure it out. Like, don't tell me they're not listening. I think you're right, but it is still, it's way more challenging because in the environment we used to live in, players were more compliant. Now, it's not a bad thing they're not.
No,
compliant.
it's not a bad thing that they ask questions. I think conversation and communication is great. I think the bad thing is when too many people think that the coach's decision has to be what's best for them before everybody else. Well, we all know that not every team is 100% equal. Everybody says, oh, you should coach everybody the same.
No,
it's not really the truth. You can't, because there's different personalities, and some guys need a pat on the back and some girls need a kick in the butt, and whatever it is, that's fine. And then your best players are going to get to make a few more mistakes because they make more good plays than you do. That's just the truth.
It's funny because like Andy Hill, who went on to be president of CBS television and a friend of mine, and he played 3 years for Wooden, and he used to always say, if I'm going to get in a little bit of trouble, I'm doing it with Kareem because we're not really going to get in too much trouble. So it's true. And Coach Wooden used to say, I always loved my players the same. Didn't like them all the same, but you treat players based on what they earn and deserve. And that's not necessarily, that's fair treatment, not equal. And I think, but it is a bigger challenge now. And it's just frightening to me, right? That it is harder to motivate players. It's harder to help them through the challenges they have in life. The challenges in life are bigger than, they're distracted by the internet, just like the kids in our, at high school. How do you get through them? How do you help them? Well, we don't train the coaches. So some guy used to be a player and he won a bunch of games in the East Coast League, and next thing he's in the NHL, he doesn't know how to talk to them. He doesn't know how to do, to motivate them. And it's hard to imagine, like the most important management person in the hockey team and any sports team is probably your coach. Right. And you're not training him to be a leader.
Yeah.
You're not training him to coach or to communicate. So what are you expecting when they don't communicate? Like it's really bizarre to me. But sports, because it's a monopoly run by labor lawyers, very little accountability, except on the ice, because those guys can't screw up without us noticing. We just got a lot of very average people in sports that fool a lot of people, right? How is it that a guy gets, he loses 3-4 environments and he gets another job? Well, there's just no training and development system. We need to look at the Moneyball model, not because that was transformative, because I always thought that bizarre that people thought that was transformative. They just started measuring their business. The local grocery store was doing that, but nobody else was doing it. So that tells you how bad it was. But at the end of the day, what's interesting about the Moneyball environment is who they hired.
Right.
Princeton grads, Harvard grads, and they were smarter. We hear it all the time. Like I hear it from owners all the time that they're told by the management team, hockey's different. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not different.
No,
It's
it's
hire
not.
the right people,
Yeah.
train them properly, support them, provide them with the resources they need to be successful. It's like, but people buy that because they're intimidated. They're the billionaire adulated the GM when he was a player. And we just need to make a lot of changes to help this because it does have a huge impact on the lives of players who aren't trained by, like Coach Wooden was as proud of the doctors, the dentists, the lawyers, and the teachers that he created the foundation for the rest of their lives, as much as he was, about Bill Walton and Kareem and those guys. And I think that we miss out on that. I think that if the real test of your program, whether it's college or hockey, is the quality of your alumni. If they're better men than their competitors, that will attract a lot of people long term, right?
Right.
Because the experience was so good, and we forget that they're men. Sometimes I forget that they're husbands and fathers. You sit down with like Mason yesterday, and yeah, it's a dad. And he's got the same problems that everybody else has, right?
Yeah.
And we need, as a group, I think sports needs to support those players that do what they do, held accountable at the level they are, to the extent that they create an opportunity for us to make an incredible amount of money. And for the most part, we're completely replaceable. There's very few executives are not replaceable. Well, there's exceptions, but not like players. And ultimately, we really do owe responsibility to these guys to be better at our jobs, right?